What's up YouTube? Welcome back to another reaction video and another F1 Fridays. Today we're checking out 8 reasons why F1 was weird in the 1950s. Going to be an interesting video. Hope you guys enjoy.
Reasons why F1 was weird in the 1950s. Formula 1 in the 1950s was almost like a completely different sport.
My apologies, so busy up here.
Although there are some elements which are comparable to modern times, there are some bits that just seem downright bizarre now. Here are 8 of the strangest. The Indy 500 was a championship round. Yep, that's right. From 1950 to 1960, the Indianapolis 500 counted towards the World Championship.
Look at that car.
Even though it was run to completely different rules by completely different teams and drivers.
No splashing people in the face, I hope.
Make attempts, notably Ascari in 1952 and Fangio in 1958, but it was mostly made up of the American racers and teams of the time. This has led to some statistical quirks which aren't always included in some F1 stats, such as 1952 Indy 500.
I like that build, but I just know not safe, of course.
F1 winner until Fernando Alonso instead of Bruce McLaren. In 1956, the 8 points Pat Flaherty got for winning the Indy 500 were enough to place him 5th in the F1 Drivers' Championship. Drivers often shared a car. In the 50s, races were longer, the tracks were bumpier, the drivers were less fit, and unreliability was regularly a factor. Quite often, when a team's lead driver retired from the race, they'd pull in a slower driver and give it to the faster guy in the hope of getting a better result.
That's tough.
And it makes for some weird-looking results. The 1955 Argentine Grand Prix was one of the hottest races on record, and most drivers had to
imagine that wearing that like heat protective gear from fires.
And Giuseppe Farina both finished 2nd and 3rd. Rules of the time meant that the points were shared evenly, and once other drivers they'd shared with were factored in, Farina and Trintignant earned themselves 3 1/3 points each. On 3 occasions the race win was shared, the last of which was the 1957 British Grand Prix when Tony Brooks and Stirling Moss won for Vanwall. This meant that second-place Luigi Musso actually scored more points than the winner. For 2 years there was no Formula 1. Well, it was still called Formula 1, but there were no F1 cars in the races. Alfa Romeo withdrew from F1 at the end of 1951, leaving Ferrari as the only serious team. Ferrari won everything anyway, with Alberto Ascari winning every F1 race he entered in 1952 and scoring 5 more wins the following year to take his 2nd championship. Across the 2 seasons, he won 7 consecutive Grand Prix, 9 if you discount the 1953 Indy 500.
Look at those.
For 1954,
the races
were run to Formula 1 specifications.
Like cars you see in GTA, like the old vintage ones.
On to the next thing. Not all F1 cars were open-wheelers. What? Sacrilege! All F1 cars should be open-wheeled forever because they always have been.
One of the James Bond
true.
movies.
Even though aerodynamics wasn't really a thing back then, designers realized that by covering the wheels, their cars would go faster in a straight line. This was especially important at fast tracks like Reims, Silverstone, and Monza, where Mercedes fitted their W196s.
I'm really curious how fast they went back then.
Vanwall also briefly tried out streamliner bodywork.
They don't look very fast.
Porsches that raced in Formula 1
they look like they barely go over 100 miles per hour.
They were just sports cars that happened to race in Grand Prix. The drivers were honourable and gentlemanly. Okay, not all of them were honourable or gentlemanly, but there are a couple of times where championships were decided because someone gave their rival a helping hand. In the final race of 1956 at Monza, Juan Manuel Fangio saw his title hopes disappear when his car broke down. This left his Ferrari teammate Peter Collins on course to become the first British champion, but incredibly he handed his car over to Fangio at a pit stop because he felt he deserved the title more. The win was
imagine that. You never see that in any sport today.
Incredible gesture, enough to win the championship. 2 years later in Portugal,
all his money on the line,
disqualified from 2nd place for bump starting his car. His title rival Stirling Moss had seen the incident and protested to the stewards, and Hawthorne was reinstated. Had Moss not done that, he would have been the champion at the end of the year. Can you imagine Lewis Hamilton going to the stewards to protest a penalty Nico Rosberg received? No, me neither. Some of the tracks were insane. There were very few permanent racetracks in the 50s, and those that did exist were usually formed on old airfields. This meant that there were plenty of road and street courses, many of which were just bonkers. Reims was basically just a triangle with very long straights.
Simple.
Avis went up each side of an autobahn and had a massive bank turn with no barrier at the top. And Pescara, the longest track ever used in F1, was so long and so dangerous that it made the Nordschleife look like Shanghai. Even Enzo Ferrari refused to race his cars there. There were points for fastest lap. What's so weird about that, I hear you say? You're right, it's not that weird. Loads of modern championships offer points for fastest lap, and some would even like to see it return in Formula 1. No, what makes it weird was the timing equipment. There was none of this highly accurate thousandth of a second stuff that we have now. It was usually just a guy with a pocket watch measuring it to the nearest whole second, which meant the single point on offer for fastest lap was often shared. The most extreme case of this happened during the 1954 British Grand Prix when seven drivers set fastest lap with a time of 1 minute and 50 seconds. Sterling Moss, Mike Hawthorne, Alberto Ascari, Juan Manuel Fangio, Onofre Marinho, Jose Froilan Gonzalez, and Jean Berra each earned 1/7 of a point for their efforts.
That's crazy.
People of royalty and nobility were regular racers. People may moan about modern drivers with rich parents paying their way to the top, but in the 50s, actual noblemen and in some cases royalty entered Grand Prix on a regular basis just because they could. One of the most famous of these was Birabongsi Banudej, better known as the Prince Bira of Siam, now Thailand. Prince Bira had a decent pre-war racing career and continued to race after the war, competing in 19 Grand Prix with a best finish of 4th. Other notable noblemen include Swiss Baron Tulo de Grafenride, Dutch Lord Karel Godin de Beaufort, and the F1 driver with the longest name of all, here goes nothing, Alfonso Antonio Vicente Eduardo Angel Blas Francisco de Borja Cabeza de Vaca y Leighton, Marquis of Portago, better known as Alfonso de Portago.
There you go.
Can you think of any reasons why F1 was weird in the 1950s? Post them in the comments section below.
Hope you guys enjoyed that interesting, fun video. I mean, it's cool to see. I'm a big history guy, so I like, reading and watching history on anything, whether that's military, government history, sports history, of course. So this is definitely an interesting video, but hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys did, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to my channel, help me get to 7,000 subscribers. I'm out, guys. Peace.